Now, another study by Hunt in 1974, and this one is more promising. It's a general sex information study including some questions on bestiality. The participants were randomly chosen by name from 24 different cities, with 982 men and 1,044 women. 71% of the participants were married, 25% were single, and 4% were divorced, but also single. The prevalence of bestiality, according to this study, declined since Kinsey's work, with a rate of 4.9% for men and 1.9% for women overall. Hunt attributes this to the migration of people from rural areas to urban ones. Very few of the men continued sexual activity with animals into adult life, indicating, just as Kinsey's study did, that most bestiality was a result of juvenile experimentation. Both men and women had such experiences very few times in life, so that only one man and no woman had such encounters more than 20 times. Now for a historical study by Monter in 1981. Monter? I don't know, I'm not good at French. A historical study of sodomy cases in French Switzerland. This was originally written in French, which concluded that bestiality was more commonly prosecuted in rural areas, while homosexuality dominated in cities. Then, a study by Zillman and Associates, which isn't really related, but I'll share it anyway. A study of 40 male undergraduates at the University of Massachusetts, exposing some number of them to disturbing erotica, including bestiality and sadomasochism, and gauging the aggressiveness of their reactions. Unsurprisingly, such exposure proves disturbing for many of them, and promotes motivated aggression. Then a study by Davies, and the description of this one given in Miletski is really short, but I think is very relevant to the topic at hand, so I'm going to quote it in its entirety. Davies compared a large number of Western societies and institutions, and found that the strong taboos that exist against homosexuality, bestiality, and transvestism are the result of attempts to establish and defend strong ethnic, religious, or institutional boundaries. In places where such pressures are weak or absent, the taboos against these forms of sexual behaviors are also weak or absent. Now a less than impressive study by Story, but, it's what we have to work with. It involves a yes or no questionnaire of 24 questions, including among them, have you ever had sexual contact with an animal? This questionnaire was given in 1974 and again in 1980, each time to 50 random males and 50 random females in a sexuality course at the University of Northern Iowa. Only 11 answered yes to the bestiality question in 1974 and 3 in 1980, suggesting that, quote, conservative society mores will curtail the number of students experiencing less socially acceptable outlets, even though the students do not profess to be conservative themselves, unquote. Now a study by Peretti and Rowan. This was a study of chronic zoophilia, and though no distinction was made between zoophilia and bestiality, it consisted of interviews with 27 men and 24 women who confided such experiences with their primary care physicians, and the interviews considered only 6 variables for explanations of why this kind of activity continued. For men, the main given reason was sexual expressiveness, because with animals there is greater freedom and less problems related to persuasion and performance compared with activity with humans. Men engaged in sexual activity unrelated to bestiality more frequently than women. No negotiation was listed as the third reason for men and women, followed by the lack of human social involvement in significance, though it wasn't significant even at the 0.05 level. Men, more than women, raised the economic issues of such a relationship, and finally the main reason given by women for these relationships was emotional involvement with the animal. Now another historical study by Liljeqvist in 1988. Liljeqvist studied 1,074 death penalty cases in Sweden from 1654 to 1756, and found that between 500 and 600 people were executed for bestiality, with plenty of animals executed as well. Almost everybody convicted of this, unshockingly, was male. Another historical study, this time in the county of Somerset, England, between 1740 and 1850. 25 men were charged with attempting or committing bestiality, and of these, 8 were found guilty. They were mostly young men from rural parishes. Morris also notes that unlike homosexuality, the age and class of participants in bestiality made them poor targets for blackmail. Now, another controversial study by Cameron et al., which isn't controversial for the way you think. In this study, an extensive questionnaire of over 500 items was sent to 4,340 heterosexual, homosexual, and bisexual adults. Among the conclusions of this study were that homosexuals and bisexuals were more likely to engage in bestiality. But the Cameron that I'm talking about here is Paul Cameron, the infamous founder of the Family Research Institute, who has for years tried to demonstrate that homosexuality is unhealthy in various ways and has used really poor methodology to do so. The paper cited here, for example, also attempts to link homosexuality to unclean environments for sex, to social disorder, whatever that means, and to pedophilia. It should be noted that Cameron was kicked out of the American Psychological Association for refusing to cooperate with an ethics investigation in 1983 regarding his methodology in these studies on homosexuality. Well, I don't know whether he was kicked out for that reason, but he insists that he was, so. Another ethnic study by Leal, this study on the gaucho population of Brazil and Uruguay, based on 2 years of field work, which showed that, to gauchos, bestiality is a legitimate practice and part of their culture. The majority had sex with animals at least once, though most did not make it a habit. For gauchos, sex with animals is another way of mastering the wild, and the more wild the animal, the more prestigious sex with it is. There is another paper which is a strange sample by Alvarez and Freinhar, and in this paper, a random sample of 20 psychiatric inpatients and 2 demographically matched control groups, consisting of medical inpatients and psychiatric staff, were given a sexual patterns questionnaire consisting of 10 yes or no questions. The results showed that of these groups, only 6 of the psychiatric inpatients reported actual sex with animals, which none of the others did. The authors claim that this shows psychiatric inpatients were more likely to use bestiality as a sexual outlet, either in reality or in fantasy. Honestly, with such a small sample size, I don't think they showed much of anything, but you can be the judge of that yourself. Cerrone interviewed 20 women in his psychology class and found that they reported that sex with various animals indeed took place in rural areas, and that it was culturally acceptable where they grew up. All I have to say about that is, no duh. Penyak in 1993 did a historical study of Central Mexican society between 1750 and 1850, examining the sexual mores of those societies, because Mexico gained its independence during that period. Though bestiality was considered more serious than masturbation, no person was put to death for it. Instead, people were sentenced to prison for 3 to 10 years, with various activities attached to their incarceration. The animals, though, were generally killed. Finally, a paper by D'Onofrio in 1996, who was a colleague of Miletski's, and in his doctoral dissertation, D'Onofrio presented 8 detailed case histories involving human-animal sexual contact. They were all Caucasian, all of the subjects, that is, had various relationship histories with human beings, and for the most part at the time of the study resided in the suburbs. The author states that this kind of contact is not a clinically significant problem, and that his study supports the idea of zoosexuality as a sexual orientation. While I have your attention, I suppose I should go over what we might be able to conclude from this research. I think the first thing that's obvious is that zoophilia, or bestiality, does occur, according to many people, and that it is more prevalent, probably, in rural areas than in urban ones. Though again, I can't really say whether zoosexuality as an orientation is more prevalent. That doesn't have any data behind it. In addition, A number of authors claim that it's somehow a mental illness, while others claim that it's not. I would tend to side with not, but that's just my opinion. Let's see. Is there anything else that I need to conclude from this various stuff? No, not really. So that's it for this video. The next one is going to actually dive into the data that Miletski gathered in her questionnaire. And it's going to take a while compared to these last few videos because I actually have to compile the data and get it into graphs and charts and make it look nice. So, I will post another video hopefully next week. And until then, this is the Erudite Kindophile signing off.